huge thank you to CIBC for making We Get It possible.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3 of We Get It. I'm so grateful that you're here with me today, wherever you are and whatever time you're watching this. I, of course, am not Corinne Shalifor, Program Director at Young Adult Cancer Canada. My name is Alex Mandarino, for those of you who might not know me, and I am a YACCtivist for the second time. I was Primetown host last summer, and I'm a local life leader in Toronto. And I wear a lot of hats at YACC, and I'm really, really grateful and happy to be putting on one more for this season of We Get It. We've taken on a lot of love towards this podcast and this program with Corinne Shally for taking the reins and showing us a lot of the information and resources, some of the amazing people at headquarters, and really the stories that we bring towards the YACC community. And I'm really happy to kind of take that forward and see a lot more info that can be brought to the table. So sit back and relax, enjoy the season, and we'll catch up soon. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Young Adult Cancer Canada. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 1 of We Get It, hosted by Alex Mandarino for the first time. Very excited moving forward to do so. So for those who may have missed the intro to this season, to this episode in particular, I am Alex Mandarino. I am the new host of We Get It for Season 3. Very, very grateful for Corinne Shally, for Program Director at YACC, to kind of hand the keys over to me, and lucky to be in this position. Super excited for this season of bringing everyone just content and interviews for healthcare professionals, maybe some HQ members of YACC and YACCtivists, Insight team members, just to bring all the different stories and information and resources to the Young Adult Cancer Canada community. And when I was going through the episodes from the previous seasons and kind of going through who might be a really good person to start, it was funny because I went through and I actually missed, we were just talking about this prior to the episode, I missed the episode where this gentleman was actually on previously. But my instant reaction was like, I have to have him for Season 3, Episode 1. Like, easily for me would be the perfect person, and that's genuine. Yeah, wipe the dirt off the shoulder. And that person is Blair Richardson. For those of you who don't know, Blair is a YACCtivist for the second term. He's a local life leader in Calgary. Still web chat host, correct, Blair?
Not anymore. Nope.
Not anymore. But
still a great program, but not a
still
web
a great
host
program.
Anymore.
No worries at all. Had the chance to dabble into that previously, and for those of you who don't know him, he's everywhere, and everyone kind of has positive things to say. We have a great rapport, and we'll kind of get into a lot of that moving forward. But welcome, Blair, and thank you for joining. First and foremost.
Thanks, buddy. Happy to be here.
Yes,
I'm excited.
I'm more than excited for this episode, just to kind of ease right into the season. And so really good question to start. I'll throw right at you right off the bat. Is what are 3 words you'd use to describe yourself?
Well, first off, I'm very tall. So that's usually the first thing people notice about me. I think I'm a very happy person and a very cheery person. And then just to take it to a different perspective, I also think I'm a bit of an anxious person. And that's something that I'm working on as well. And probably something that we'll talk about today, honestly, at some point. So yeah.
Nice. I can vouch for at least the first 2 or 3. Definitely tall, and haven't seen you not smile very often, to be honest. So, and obviously already we're starting off with some smiling. So that's fantastic. Yeah. And again, you're very ingrained in the YACC community over the past few years, but for a lot of us that may have been entering YACC for the first time and who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about your cancer story with MDS and everything that goes along with that and beyond to kind of where you're at today?
Yeah. So like Alex said, I have a blood cancer called MDS. The full name is myelodysplastic syndrome. And it's very similar to the AML, acute myeloid leukemias, in terms of a comparison. So I was diagnosed back in 2016. It'll be 6 years this summer. And I spent 8 to 10 months, I think, very sick in the hospital. The day I was diagnosed, I kind of, not cognizantly, but in the back of my mind, made a decision. I'm either going to live to see a bone marrow transplant, which was the treatment plan, or whatever else could happen. So I was very sick and I'd end up in the hospital. and needing to get, like, I called it reset kind of thing. So they'd hydrate me and make sure, give me blood, everything, make sure everything was okay. Ended up in the hospital for about a week, and then I go home, and then I crash again and not drink and not eat and just get myself right back into the same situation I was in. And then I ended up in the hospital for 2 months, and then got out for 2 weeks, and then was in the hospital for another 3 months, receiving my bone marrow transplant. So that was a really hard time, a lot of time spent in the hospital. That's when Pokemon Go became really popular, and I was super jealous that I wasn't out playing Pokemon Go with everybody.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that was a really tough time, but there was nothing else going on in my mind except it was like it was survival mode at that moment. Had my transplants, everything went well with that. I handled everything quite well. But unfortunately, 8 months after my transplant, I had a relapse, and my MDS came back. And at that moment, I was given some not so fantastic statistics, some 2-year statistics kind of thing. And it was really stressful. And so I had my relapse, and it was very stressful, but I knew I couldn't go back to living life the same way that I did before my transplant. I knew if I wanted to survive and like have any shot at life, I needed to just push on and figure out how to live. And so I spent about a year slowly figuring it out, kind of on my own. I had very much the mentality of I can do this on my own, I can figure this out. And then I went through a massive breakup with the girl that I had dated before cancer and was my main support all through it. And I realized, oh, I cannot do this all alone anymore. And I went to my first YACC local life event, and that was the night my life changed. And I met all of these people in this fantastic community and saw people can actually live a life with cancer, or beyond cancer. And so I started to change my ways, and over the last few years, my life has completely changed, and my perspective on life and the people I spend my time with, and the priorities in my life. And I threw those 2-year statistics out the window and have just been flying through, and actually received a remission status a few weeks ago. So that's very exciting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, unfortunately, very high chance that my cancer will come back and I have to continue on with chemo. But at least I don't have to worry about cancer cells in my body currently. So that's
No kidding.
one less thing that I have to worry about. So yeah, cancer has definitely changed my life in a lot of negative ways, but I think some positive ones as well.
Yeah, and as I think a lot of people feel really similar to you, and thanks for sharing all that, Blair. I know I personally, I know I knew a lot about that. I even knew about the remission status because we have conversations in different groups. But amazing to hear, especially at this point, right? And great kind of story for the first episode of the season right off the bat. And you discuss some of like the ways you spend your time and the relationships that you have with everybody. And it's a great way to kind of segue into what the topic of today is really going to be focused on, mainly is just relationships and how cancer affects relationships, how it might not affect relationships, but really the whole overarching theme of relationships and cancer. And you and I have been friends for a few years, and had the pleasure of kind of living in the same room during the same first time that we've met. So our first interaction, like, what was that kind of like when we first met a few years ago?
Well, as I tell everybody, let me tell you about the time Alex left me in downtown Toronto by myself. Never have been to Toronto before, and I was all alone, and Alex left me there because he had to go to work. But but yeah, so Alex, you were the first one that I met, the first YACCer that I met on like a national scale. I had met like the local people, but I still hadn't really engaged with the national side of YACC. And so it was very nerve-wracking that weekend. But yeah, I didn't know what to expect going into it. I had no idea who you were, and I could not have been happier. And I think we became instant friends that weekend, and we've happily had some time, not nearly enough time to spend together in person since then. But we're definitely some pretty darn good friends now.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. No, that was awesome. I like remember joining, walking, and I think you had moved into the hotel room in Toronto first and kind of put everything together. And I walked in, and it was funny. I've never really told you this before, but I like for you, was the first kind of national scale, as you mentioned, interaction with YACC as a whole. And I had, for some reason, maybe not obviously met in person because we're in different provinces, but I was like, he looks really familiar. I feel like he's done a lot of like YACC stuff. Maybe we just haven't bumped into each other.
Yeah.
And then when we had conversations, it was like, oh, you're pretty new to the whole national side of things. And so that was a pretty big jump, I'm sure, into, you know, that national side of things. And the whole YACtivist program was new for the most part, kind of the second round in, and it was revamped. But it was funny because, yeah, like we got along so well, and there isn't as many men in the cancer community, but I think similar age, similar like hobbies and mindsets. So that was awesome. And obviously now we're here. So
Yeah,
cool.
and I can remember that first day hearing like I heard that you and some other people who already knew each other prior
Yeah.
to training were meeting up before, and I was like, oh, well, they all know each other, and I was so nervous going in, and then like instant acceptance and
100%.
just friends with everybody right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
It
awesome.
was so easy. It was awesome. And so that first YACtivist training that we mentioned, so in 2019, for those of you who are unaware, was technically the second sort of relaunching of the YACtivist program, but in maybe a more confined space in terms of like the program initiatives and everything that was involved in it. And we had about 15, 16 of us met in Toronto, and we had training for 4 days or so. We learned a ton about how to really like promote our stories, how to make an impact. Sharon Bray had a writing prompt session that was awesome. Chris Graham had a discussion on like owning your story and kind of putting your story together. How did you feel? You kind of touched on it, but how did you feel about YACC at that point and your role as the activist kind of after those 4 days of training?
Yeah. So before like even my cancer diagnosis, like I was someone who worked in like very caring jobs, and so like things like circles of sharing and stuff like that, or stuff that I've come across before. But at that first YACC training, like we sat down and I watched Kareen or Leslie throw a box of tissues in the middle of a circle, and I was like, yes, this is where I need to be. I love this stuff. And so for those of you who don't know, that was sharing in a circle. We all shared our stories and the trials that we've been through, and it can get quite emotional at times. And so always got to have a box of tissues around at any YACC event.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that weekend was fantastic. And not only did I learn a lot about YACC that I didn't know, just being exposed to it in the local level as opposed to the national. But yeah, getting to meet so many new people, and again, seeing them live their lives with cancer diagnosis or beyond it. And that was super inspiring to me. And like the writing workshop that we did with Sharon Bray, if anybody ever gets a chance to do one of those, like it taught me, like I'm not a journaler at all, but it taught me like how to just vomit my thoughts onto a page kind of thing, and like not worry about quality and stuff like that. And I find like now it just helps get so much off my chest, the writing, and I never would have learned that if I hadn't gone to that YACtivist training, and just so many other things. But the biggest thing coming out of it was the new connections and the new friendships that I still carry on today.
Yeah, I agree. Like being in the community prior to that for about 2 years, you meet a lot of great people, but in that training, like that's a great way to start, really, with everyone kind of telling their stories. But having like the group of us that just felt confident, we're like, you know what, we're just going to throw it all on the table and then just see what sticks. And it was so instant. I hadn't felt that way about that kind of small group at that point. And then Retreat yourself, we kind of had a chance, Blair, you and I, to join one of those again later on. But it was an instant connection with everyone, which is awesome. And really speaking about connection, Gabrielle Facto, the program coordinator within YACC, and I had a podcast prior to We Get It called Soar Above Cancer, and you and I had a conversation. 3 of us had a conversation once. And one question we brought up at that point that I was curious about relationship-wise is about you've spoken before about like hesitation of bringing cancer into new friendships or romantic maybe relationships for fear of kind of like what the reaction is. Do you still feel that you hold a similar view to that, or has your mindset kind of changed? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the reason I have hesitation, or have had hesitation around introducing cancer into relationships is the day I was diagnosed, I lost all my friends. So going into my diagnosis, like I had a great group of friends, just finished a semester at university and felt like my friends in university um, would be there for me through my diagnosis, and was working at a summer camp with all these caring people that I had met over the last couple of weeks. And I thought, they're amazing friends. Like we just, like, again, we did sharing circles there, and I felt so close to all these people. And then I had my cancer diagnosis, and I was very open and told, like I pretty much made a Facebook status, I think, one of the first days I was diagnosed. And all my friends disappeared. I got a lot of texts saying like, hey, we're here for you. Well, like, what do you need, kind of thing. And at the time, like, I didn't need anything, but then I just like never heard from them again. And that was really, really hard. And so coming out of my bone marrow transplant, and I remember the first Facebook friend I made, and I was like, oh no, they're gonna find out that like I'm a cancer survivor through my Facebook and not talk to me anymore. And so like I scrubbed my Facebook clean of any ounce of cancer, which I regret doing today, because I lost quite a few memories that I would have liked to have gone back and looked at. But yeah, like I was so hesitant to share it with anybody just because I didn't want that same reaction happening, and I didn't want people to see me as weak or vulnerable or needing extra help and things like that, or excluding me from things because I have cancer and they think I can't do it and stuff like that. So yeah, nowadays, like, not making so many friends anymore because of COVID. But I kind of I keep a motto when it comes to making friends. Like, if they're not associated with the cancer world at all, I tend to keep that side of my life to myself, until I know them very well, kind of thing, and I feel like I know that they'll accept me for it. But the YACC side of things, and like the friends that I've made on that side, like I'm so open. I'm literally an open book, I tell people, and I'm always happy to talk about my story and to hear other people's and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was very hard for a long time keeping that bundled up inside me. But then once I found the YACC world, I found I was able to express it enough and get it enough off my chest that it wasn't something that bugged me on a daily basis.
Nice. It's nice to see that you kind of made a bit of a transition, but yeah, it's hard. I mean, everyone kind of approaches those relationships differently in how they introduce cancer. And I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way, but you know, it just depends on the person. So that's awesome. You kind of answered it, but just out of curiosity, because everyone's story is a little different. Do you have any of the same friends prior to diagnosis, or have you more so met friends during or after you were first diagnosed with cancer?
I have one friend from before my cancer diagnosis. And then other than that, nobody that I really talk to anymore, unfortunately. Yeah. And then what was the second part of your question?
No, that was pretty much it.
I
mean, that was that question in general, just because I know you kind of touched on it before. You know, and everyone kind of, some people have friends that have stuck around, but I mean, I think we've all experienced at least one or two people who have just, they don't know what to say or how to handle it, and they kind of, unfortunately, you know, take maybe a step back. And it's jarring. It's not something that you expect, but I think you learn to live with it. And the cancer community is awesome, as we've both kind of experienced. So that's really cool.
And it's really hard for like people, like when we had cancer, like our friends, because I was 21 when I was diagnosed with cancer. I don't know how old you were.
20.
20. So and so like, I don't think any of my friends had cancer in their life at that point, kind of thing. And so nobody really knows how to talk about it. And so I think they were just kind of scared to talk to me and worried about saying something wrong. But the advice I always say to survivors is to supporters is just make the effort. Like, just reach out. It's not always the right day for us survivors, but just knowing that we have someone there who's reaching out to us it means a lot.
Big time. And you're someone who, funny enough, when we first met, like, it was almost instant that I knew that you just like had a lot of cool hobbies that not a lot of other people tended to have, or that maybe just myself hadn't had a chance to dive a lot into. So you introduced me to Ticket to Ride, unbelievable game. To this day, still haven't bought it, but it's on the list. D&D as well is something you're really into, right?
Yep.
Like, yeah.
Yep.
And
Dungeons and
so
Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons for those
For
who
those
don't know the
non-nerds,
acronym.
of course.
There you go. And you're someone really just like with a ton of different kind of hobbies. So how have you really personally made friends, especially after being diagnosed?
Yeah. Um, that is a good question that I need to kind of ask myself right now, coming out of the COVID pandemic and everything like that. Still fully in it, but like
Yeah.
the friends that I was with at the beginning of the pandemic, like some of them have moved on or different beliefs and stuff like that. And so like
Yeah.
I've got this new mental attitude around making friends. And so the way I did it back then, I think was just putting myself out there and going to like local hobby nights and stuff like that. So for like Dungeons and Dragons, I go to the local nerd store and hang out with the guys there and just slowly become their friends through common interest kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so those were the kind of people that I wasn't telling about my cancer diagnosis, except for one or two of them who I became quite close with. Yeah, and so I think that's the biggest thing is just being brave and putting yourself out there. And it's so much easier if you have a cancer community to do it with, because like everybody there has either had cancer or is supporting someone with it. And so it's not this big secret that you need to hide from everybody. Everybody already knows. And so if you want to talk about cancer, you can talk about cancer. But if you don't want to talk about cancer, people are happy to talk about anything else or do anything else kind of thing.
Yeah. 100%. No, that's awesome. It's funny. I feel so stupid asking that kind of like, how do you make friends? But it's true. Like whether you're in the cancer community or not at this point, everyone's in this place where like, whether it's romantic or just more for friendships, like it's how do you make friends? So I'm curious kind of how that works. But yeah, I guess it's changed over the past, 2 years or so. And I mean, transitioning into maybe more of a romantic side of things, I've heard a little bit about this, like I said before, just through other means, but what was your romantic life like when you were first diagnosed? Like just kind of right prior, and how did it kind of change moving forward?
Yeah. So like I said, when I was first diagnosed, I was dating a girl. We were in university together and were dating for about a year before my diagnosis. And then once the diagnosis came, we decided to take it on together, and she was a good support for me through the whole thing. And then about a year after my relapse, like I said, completely out of the blue, she came to me and said like she can't handle my cancer anymore. And that was very, very hard. Like I said, she was my main support. But then there's also the side of the person you love leaving you because of something that you can't change in your body. And so I spent a few days like really upset. But then with this whole new cancer thinking and realizing life is short and I need to live it, I came to the realization like if this girl doesn't love me, there's nothing I can do about that. Time to move on, because I'm a
Yeah.
guy who likes to be in a relationship. And so it was like, okay, if she's not gonna be my one, I'm gonna go find someone who is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've kind of touched on it before. I think you and I have had very different experiences pretty much since we've met, but even, yeah, just prior to diagnosis and everything, where I was basically single at the time that I was diagnosed and was kind of happy about it just because I didn't experience what you did. And obviously it's led to you today in a much more positive scenario anyway. So I'm kind of glad that that took its turn for, the way it ended up. But I think, for everyone, it's a little bit different. And I mean, even now, like whether it's post cancer or whether it's in a pandemic, dating is very difficult for those who are single, obviously at this point. And I remember listening to a few of the stories you told on previous podcasts or just through like interactions about different ways that you've told someone that you either had or have cancer through a dating means. So do you mind touching on, it doesn't have to be many, but maybe like on your negative and positive stories of telling someone that you might be starting to date that you have cancer?
Yeah. So of course I did the dating the way any millennial would do these days, the online dating thing. And so I thought I'm going to put cancer survivor in my bio, and girls are going to read that and think this guy is amazing. He survived cancer. I didn't say living with cancer because like I didn't want that side out
Yeah.
there quite yet, but like, I just stuck with cancer survivor. Um, And I don't think anybody ever read the bio because nobody ever brought it up to
No.
me. But for a while there, like I was very open and would tell girls while we were chatting on the app kind of thing. Um, and like I don't know if it directly contributed, but like I was finding girls would stop replying to me the day after I told them kind of stuff, and talking to the YACC community and asking around and hearing other people's opinions. I think I kind of came to the decision of taking that out of my bio and not telling people until they had a chance to meet me as Blair first. And so like if it ever came up, like I would again tell them that I was a cancer survivor, but I would leave out that part where I was still going through treatments. Yeah, and so a couple of girls, like, I got to know, and then I told, and then things didn't work out for whatever reason. But yeah, so I put in that don't tell girls about a week before I met my current girlfriend, and then I completely threw that out the window on her first date. And I was like, I'm in love with this girl. I need to tell her before things go any further. And I told her, and she was completely accepting. And now she's been my main rock for maybe 3 years in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Next week.
Oh, that's awesome. Good for you guys. I didn't even know that timing. I mean, why would I know the exact day? But that's awesome. Very cool.
February 4th, Alex.
There you
Have
go.
it in your head. Put it in your calendar.
I'm gonna note that down. I'm gonna note that down just in case. But no, I mean, and we communicate a lot, so stuff like this is actually shared. So if you didn't tell me now, I'm sure I'd find out on the day, which is awesome. And I think the greatest part of that, the reason I wanted to ask that is because like you had positive and negatives no matter what you decided to do. So I think that just puts forward the fact that I think you should just feel comfortable with whatever way you personally feel is best to introduce. Everyone obviously has a different type of cancer and different story and experience with it. But like you found positive and negatives both ways. And then, in your heart, you were like, you know what, I'm just going to say it. And that's that. And it worked. So I know some people aren't as lucky currently. Maybe they're still looking for someone, myself included. But I found that no matter what, it just kind of is something that is more organic. It's hard to kind of make that decision beforehand and follow a rule. I think it's good to know that, if the time comes and you feel that it's right, and maybe it's just something in your heart you want to share, I mean, by all means. So I think that's why I was curious, because not a lot of people have both sides of the coin where it's been positive and negative. So that's always a good question that I like asking.
Yeah. I think my biggest piece of advice, no matter how you want to go about dating, for any cancer survivor, is if you tell someone and then they don't have any interest in you anymore or move on, it's never your fault. Cancer is not something that any of us chose for ourselves. And so it's just a part of our life. And if someone can't accept us for that, then that's their problem and not ours.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, is that the person we would want to be with anyway? Exactly. It kind of just, there you go. And so when I was listening back and prepping for the interview with you, and prepping is kind of a funny term because realistically, it was just easy to kind of have a conversation with you. But I wanted to kind of get a gauge of the last time that Gabrielle and I did an interview with you on this similar topic, some of the answers you provided. And one thing that stuck out was that you kind of knew the type of career, maybe not specifically, but career/personality that you were looking for after you were diagnosed and you were kind of eventually going through the motions of anyone in their 20s kind of goes through when dealing with the apps or whatever the case might be. You kind of knew the career and personality that you were looking for when you were dating during cancer. So how did you come to kind of determine what that was?
Yeah, I always say this jokingly, and I don't know if it makes me shallow or not, but when I started dating again, I was like, okay, I've got cancer. I need to find someone who's caring, who's in a caring profession. All right, I need to find a nurse, a teacher, someone like that, someone who's very caring and would be understanding of my situation. And I ended up finding a child and youth care counselor. So I found the right person. But that was my thoughts around it, was like, I know I'm someone who, from my partner, like I need to be supported. And so I knew I needed to find someone who would be able to support me, and had the natural inclination towards it. I'm not saying a lawyer can't do that kind of thing, but I'm saying a teacher might be more likely, kind of thing.
Yeah. I love that because when I first think about like my mindset's changed, but I think prior to diagnosis, and again, age plays a factor too. But if someone's asking you what type of person are you looking for, I would probably think of more like aesthetics, like, oh, green eyes and looks like this. Whereas eventually you get to a point, and I think cancer really matures you for this specific reason, is you start thinking of the stuff that you bring up, like what's their personality like? What are their day to day, and how are they going to handle my personality? How are we going to connect as people? So I began to think that way when we first talked, and even listening to the episode a few days ago, just to kind of get an idea. I was like, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm actually curious. This isn't something I wrote down, but the point you made brought it up. Like, how long after, just for curiosity's sake, how long after you kind of thought, I need to find someone who's more caring, to when you met your current partner? Like, what was that time difference? Do you know? Was it a month?
I was lucky and was able to find Ashley quite quickly.
Yeah.
I think it was 5 or 6 months after my breakup, kind of thing.
Nice.
Which again, for a lot of people, they would say that's way too fast. But again, I had the mindset of, screw this old girl. She can't handle a fundamental part of me. Time to move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like I was free from all emotional burdens of that past relationship, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was lucky to find Ashley quite quickly.
Nice.
Yeah. But like I said, I did try starting dating again pretty much right away, and I had some fun encounters along the way.
As I'm sure all of us have in the community, you know, who
Yeah.
are looking for a new relationship. But I like the mindset of, you know what, like, I don't know how long I might have left is very valid for some people.
Mhm.
And so I don't think there should be any shaming of, you know what, I'm going to try and find someone else because I'm ready for it. So that's different for everyone. But I think that plays a factor where you're thinking like, I've, you know, gone through stuff or currently going through these things and I want to be happy. So I think it's a relevant point.
Yeah.
Now, it's different for everyone in this situation, but do you find that it's easier to be single or in a relationship during your cancer experience?
Um, I think in my opinion, it's easier to be in a relationship.
Mm,
Uh, well, it depends. If I look at that first stage of my cancer diagnosis where I was very sick and in the hospital a lot, um, the thing about being in a relationship that brought me happiness was having a different person in my life, kind of thing. Like
yeah,
my parents, they had their rotation. My mom would come and see me in the afternoon, and then my dad would come and hang out with me in the evening. And that would happen every day. And so when I got to see the girl I was dating at the time, who was also in school, and so she was quite busy, but when I got to see her a couple of times a week, it was a different person to see and a different like style of relationship. And so like we ordered pizza into the hospital one night, and that was a lot of fun. And I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. Or I had her wheel me down, even though I was so sick. I was craving, the hospital had a second cup, and I was like, I need a frozen hot chocolate.
yeah.
And so I had her wheel me down to the second cup, and I got my large frozen hot chocolate, and I went back up, drank it. 20 minutes later, threw it all up again, but I was so happy. And yeah, again, I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own.
Yeah.
But then I imagine for her, it was extremely hard dating someone who was on his deathbed at times,
Right.
in the hospital, very sick, infection after infection kind of thing. And so I bet that was really hard on her. Um, but now in the relationship I'm in the state of life I'm in, I love having the support that Ashley can give me. She comes to a bunch of my appointments, and she helps keep me accountable with things too. Like
Good.
cancer has, or the chemo has radiated my brain, and now I have the worst memory in the world. And so it's nice having her to remind me of the big things that I forget and stuff like that. And yeah, I would say currently I'm happy in a relationship during my cancer diagnosis.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Now, and I know that was your answer beforehand, but I was just curious, and I feel like everyone kind of has their differing opinions too. So it's good to have a firm side, one or the other. It does depend, as most things do, right? But like me, I personally felt, I guess it depends on your own experience with cancer, but I was single, and I was like, I don't think I could have handled somebody else with me, because, you know, I would have tended to be upset. I may have taken it out on them, or to try and kind of manage that person's feelings as well. I may not have been as mature at the time. So I personally don't think I could have handled it in my own right. But I think that there's a very valid point that you make where, you might not be able to do things on your own, whereas having someone like a companion is very helpful. So it's good to see both sides of the coin. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And with your current relationship with Ashley now, and from obviously the looks of it, I'm going to determine you're extremely happy, and that's just the way it's going to be, whether you're not or you are. Would you be the same partner with Ashley as you are now if you were with her and had not been diagnosed with cancer?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be. As you said, Alex, like when you were diagnosed, you were less mature. But if there's one thing that cancer does, it matures you overnight.
Oh yeah.
And so like I grew up a lot with the cancer diagnosis, but also my like whole perspective on life changed. The way I saw the world, I'm much more appreciative of like the little things now, and I think I'm a much more empathetic person now, and receiving so much care in the over the years makes me want to care back for other people. And so like I really like being in a relationship because it's someone that I can look after when so many other people are looking after me. It makes me feel like I'm doing something for someone else. And then like, yeah, I would say I matured a lot. I became more empathetic, and just in general, like I've just had this different perspective on life that I think is a positive aspect in a relationship.
100%. Yeah. As you were telling that wonderful story, the weather is personifying your emotion. I'm getting blasted by the sun now, and so yeah, I can tell the same.
No, cloudy day.
No? Cloudy day. Well, maybe he was just bringing it out in Toronto, but I love that. That's hilarious. We're gonna switch a little bit, like still sticking with relationships, but kind of transferring over. We're to YACCtivists. There was one other gentleman, Matt, who is still a YACCtivist, but previously a YACCtivist, who were male. And there's not a lot of male YACCtivists, or in general, the young adult cancer community, whether it's YACC or elsewhere, there's not a lot of men involved. And so being one of the men within YACC, I guess specifically, how does it feel representing kind of that smaller demographic within that community?
Yeah. So going into it, I had no idea that men were a smaller demographic, and just kind of throughout my life, like everything I've done has been more female oriented. So I did like my Bachelor of Education, which is more, I think there were 5 guys out of 90 people. Wow. Kind of thing in the whole program. Always got along better with girls. And so like, I've always had more female friends in my life. And so going into YACC, it wasn't anything different. And so I didn't recognize that anything was different until people like Jeff started pointing it out to me. And I was like, oh, men are underrepresented in this community. I wonder why. And I talked to some other YACCers and found out like statistically men wait until the last minute before they go look for help, kind of thing, like when things are desperate. And I was like, that's when I went to look for help, kind of thing. And so it's like, oh man, like I'm realizing all these things. And so now I'm a huge advocate for men in the community, and showing ourselves, kind of thing, to show that we are here. And like, I'm happy to talk to any guy who wants to talk, kind of thing. And it is just, it's different in its own ways being a man. The whole cancer system and the way we interact with people and the way people interact with us, it's different. And so it's nice to have other guys that we can talk to and compare notes and share perspectives and stuff like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny you bring up the point of kind of getting along with women better. I've always told people I feel very similar. I don't know if it's just like a personality thing that maybe we both share, but I think that's why both of us have stuck around with YACC as long as we have. Obviously, because the people that work, that had like the HQ, they're incredible, to say the least. But I think it's the community. It is sways more towards women, and I think the conversation is hopefully to ingrain more men in the community earlier. Because it's funny. Again, we both entered kind of later on, and when we were first diagnosed, we were kind of out there somewhere else, and now we're like, oh, okay, let's seek some help. And so what would you say to someone like a man who might be either first diagnosed or maybe they're near the ending of their journey, who's hesitant to kind of share their story? Like, any advice, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And so we kind of talked about it earlier, and like
Yeah.
anybody would be hesitant sharing that with, we call them cancer muggles in the community, people who
Yeah.
have never been exposed to cancer, or, it's down the chain. My grandma had it, that kind of stuff, but nothing that really affected them personally. And so I would say, like, just go for it in the cancer community. Like, we're all here. We've all had a cancer diagnosis. Like, there's nothing to hide from us. And so if you want to share the story, just give her kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like,
Totally.
there's no reason to hold back in the YACC group and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so I I addressed it earlier, but YACC is my release when I need to talk about cancer and get it off my chest. And I'm so appreciative to have it around.
Yeah. I agree. It doesn't matter who you are. And like, there's so many people to listen. And sometimes it's like the first step is at least getting someone else to listen to you and get it, whether they just kind of don't ask any questions. You could say, and it's fine. I always say, like, I'll just use the word steroids in conversation. And if you're not in the cancer community, like, the whole context of steroids means something totally different. So not having to explain things like that makes a difference. That's awesome advice.
The thing
Yeah.
that I talk about with cancer people all the time is our poops and the ways that they've affected us over the years of our cancer. And then
Oh my God.
I talk about it a little bit outside of the cancer community. I'm like, oh no, can't talk about that.
Let that slip a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Kayla and
That's
I love
awesome.
to talk about our poop stories.
Oh, I know all about that. Oh yeah. Oh my God. Good. And Blair, I mean, so thank you first of all, but like, how are you doing currently? I know we talked a little bit at the beginning. I know you're transitioning to a new transitioned recently to more of a new chemotherapy, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yeah.
also another year of activism, I guess is the word to use. Like, how are you feeling currently, just all around?
Yeah. I'm in a really weird place right now. I'm in the same kind of
Yeah.
place that I was when I discovered YACC, like a time of a lot of change. And so, like Alex said, I've just swapped up chemos. And so the old chemo I used to use is done by injections into my stomach, 15 injections over 5 days. And I did that for over 4 years. So someone else can do the math on how many needles I got, kind of thing. But that was rough from like a physical aspect. Like, it left a big red burn on my stomach, kind of thing, big red rash that felt like a sunburn, a really, really bad sunburn. And so besides like the internal symptoms, so the nausea and that kind of stuff with that chemo, like, I also had a very big physical element to it. Luckily, science has progressed, and there's now a new oral version of my chemo out. It's still quite new on the market. Only has had 2 clinical trials, but my doctor was very optimistic about it. And I was like, you know what, it's time for a change. Let's give it a try. And I had my first cycle and it went really, really well. Minimal side effects. My blood counts barely dropped. Like, it was like a massive improvement from my last one. From a medical standpoint, we're going to have to take about 3-4 cycles to truly know how it would affect me. But so far, I'm really optimistic with that. And so now this is bringing in a whole element of, hopefully, fingers crossed, this spring COVID will start cooling down again, and
I know.
I don't have to worry about a cancer or a chemo that physically takes me out of it, kind of thing. And so, like, I want to start getting back out in the world. I was immunocompromised through COVID, and so lost some friends again, and some people grew apart and hobbies changed. And so, like, now I'm at this point in my life where it's like, it's time for a job. What do I want to do for a job? How do I get a job? Because I've been out of the world for the last 5 years. And so that's a whole big thing.
Yeah.
And then, like, I just need to start getting out of the house more often. Like, I want to start making some new friends that I can be really close with, kind of thing. And find some new hobbies and stuff that gets me out of the house a little bit more often, because most of my hobbies keep me in the house now. And just trying to live a more normal life, kind of thing, while also having this cancer going on in the background. So
Yeah.
it's a massive time of change, but I figured out how to do it last time, and I'm gonna figure out how to do it again this time.
Yes, Blair. Dude, I'm glad that you no, I know. I'm glad you shared all that, because even me, like that, I have no idea that there was so much really changing in your life in that regard. So I'm kind of glad I caught you at this time, you know, when you're in like this phase of, you know what, let's do this all over again. And like, let's learn it. Let's take on this challenge. And in the relationships, I'm not going anywhere. You got a bunch of group of people that are here, you know, for
I'm not
whatever.
letting you go anywhere.
No, I know. You'd come over to Toronto to keep me around and vice versa. So that's awesome. And good luck to you with everything, obviously. And I'll be around for all of it.
Thanks, buddy.
No, you got it. But we'll end with a random one. I ask everybody this, mainly funny enough, relationship wise, when I start first dates or when I make new friends. What are your top 3 fruits?
Yeah, I don't believe in fruit. So, you know, grape flavored candy, banana flavored candy, and strawberry flavored candy would be my 3 favorite fruits.
That's an answer. That's an answer. Whether I take that as strawberry, banana, and grape is beyond. That's my choice, but I'll take it. That's fair. Grapes are in my top 3. I appreciate it. I always love ending with stuff like that. They normally start conversations, but a little fun way to kind of end things off there. I love it. Embrace debate. So that's awesome, Blair. Good. And again, thanks for coming on. We'll chat obviously a million times past this. And thanks everyone for joining us today, whether you're listening on the 31st of January, when this is released at 7 p.m. Eastern, or whether you're kind of taking this at a time that works best for you. You know, welcome to season 3. That was Blair Richardson. You'll hear a lot more from him moving forward in his many roles. And we'll chat soon, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening, day, afternoon, or whatever have you. And just take care.
See you, everyone.
Guys. Thanks again for watching. And before you go, just tune in every Monday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern for all your favorite YACC stories, professionals, and resources right here. Have a great night, everybody.